Hello my friends. My name is Bot Mathematician, and this is Holomancer.
And of course Dora, the most daring reporter.
We are infinitely grateful that we have another opportunity to see you all again.
In this video, we explore the first half of the Death Knight cards, including the Frost Rune cards. We will try to determine the uniqueness of the mechanic and the level of power creep using our algorithm.
Before we begin, I must make an important announcement. After the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, I managed to partially restore the technical capabilities for creating videos. Putin losing the initiative at the front in battles with the Ukrainian army, continues acts of terrorism against all residents of Ukraine. In most regions, the main electrical substations were destroyed or damaged by rocket attacks, including in my city. Lack of electricity can completely deprive me of the opportunity to work, and leave me without running water and eating in winter. With each new missile attack, the situation becomes more and more difficult. Of course, I will continue to create new videos, for as long as I have even a small opportunity, but if I suddenly disappear, don't worry. I will return, as soon as possible. Many thanks to our patrons for their support in such a difficult time for us. Your help is invaluable.
Let's move on to the main topic of the video. Death Knight's main features are a special resource, Corpses, which is used to enhance the effects and activate additional benefits, and a unique runic system for deck buildings. Your deck has 3 rune slots. The more slots you occupy with a certain type of rune, the more powerful cards you can use in your deck and vice versa. In theory, this approach allows developers to isolate very powerful effects within a single strategy. But are 3 rune cards really that powerful? Let's find out.
Let's finally get to our review. Our method is based on comparing the actual mana cost of the card, and the nominal value of the effects against classic Hearthstone standards. This approach helps us define power creep numerically.
Let's start with the cards that got the lowest scores. Repulsive Gargantuan is a type of aura creator. While this card is on the board, your enemy characters can't be healed. The special features of the effect are situationality and long-term action. This effect is unique and has no analogues in Hearthstone. For this reason it is impossible to establish its value, but the effect does not look useful against most strategies. When you play this card, you gain a body equivalent to 4 mana plus a useless effect. But the presence of even a useless effect creates additional value. So by investing 4 mana you get a creature that is equivalent to 5 mana by classic Hearthstone standards. The utility ratio determines the level of power creep. If this indicator is equal to 1, then the actual mana cost and the nominal value are fully in line with the original basis of the game. In this case, this figure is 1.3, a very weak result even for classic Hearthstone.
Remorseless Winter is a copy of Consecration with an additional card draw option. Compared to the classic card, the new one looks much better. But with AoE cards it's not so easy. In each individual case, your real benefit will not depend on the cost of a spell, but rather on the total number of destroyed enemies. For this reason, all AoE cards have variable value and the level of difficulty to activate the effect is higher than most other cards.
The Defrost spell is a kind of copy of Spectral Sight. Getting 1 card for 2 mana is an extremely weak effect. To get a second card, you will need to invest 2 corpses. This may be too expensive for some strategies, but despite this, it is potentially a good technical tool. Hearthstone rarely allows you to draw cards on more favorable terms.
The next card is a real mystery for us. Body Bagger's Body is equivalent to 1.5 mana crystals. An additional card effect gives you a corpse. How to evaluate the value of a corpse that did not originally have a body? From a mathematical point of view, this is a terrible card, but in practice, this card can be an ideal first drop. Modern decks contain unequal cards in terms of power. Very often, strategies are built around using very weak cards, which can give a huge advantage due to the synergy with several completely broken cards. This is called balance.
Harbinger of Winter also draws a card from the deck, but of a specific type. This effect is more predictable and has combo potential. This card's referent is Star's Crier. The utility ratios are unimpressive for today's standards, but as a general rule, players use most cards with draw mechanics.
Chillfallen Baron is the preferred 2-card draw tool, as he is a potential corpse.
Horn of Winter is an insane card. This is a copy of Lightning Bloom but without the negative consequences. The card allows you to manipulate mana and thus realize more resources throughout the turn, but at the same time, it is not an analog of the preparation spell, which allows you to play a more expensive powerful spell 2 turns earlier. Glacial Advance is a scaled-up and improved version of Lunar Eclipse, as the spell allows you to deal damage to the opponent's hero as well. This is a huge advantage that, for some reason, has never affected the cost of cards.
Team 5 continues to draw inspiration from classic cards. Howling Blast A2 Swipe with an additional freeze effect and a reduced cost. But in modern Hearthstone, players want to freeze creatures for less cost. Despite this, the card's overall power level is twice as high compared to the classic basis of the game.
Icy Touch is another card inspired by the classic Hearthstone. The card does pretty much the same thing as Frost Shock. The card has a chance to become one of the most popular Death Knight tools due to its useful effect, low cost and lack of rune slots.
Rhyme Sculptor is very similar to Dr. Boom. An important advantage is the generation of 3 corpses with 1 card. Death Rattle always creates delayed value, which is a disadvantage. The core strategy for decks with frost runes is to interact with frost spells. Ymiriar Frostbreaker is the perfect first drop in decks with this mechanic. On the first turn, the maximum possible number of frost spells in your hand can be 3 or 4 if you go second. Potentially getting a 4/2 minion on the first turn is completely broken, but at the same time, the difficulty level of getting this value is 5th, since your deck will most likely not be able to consist only of frost spells.
Overseer Frigidera is very similar to Belinda Stonehearth. Both cards cost 6 mana, and draw 2 cards of a specific type. But Belinda has a more powerful effect. Even if Frigidera manages to activate the additional effect of Consecration, your benefit will be less impressive but more balanced. Corpse Bride is a very controversial card. Summoning a single large creature has fewer benefits than summoning multiple small minions. Moreover, this summon looks too expensive. If you manage to collect 8 corpses on turn 5, which seems extremely unlikely, your utility ratio will be 2.4. This is a good result, but the fewer corpses you have in stock, the less benefit you will get.
Marrow Manipulator is very similar to Sneed's Killer Mech, but costs less, and doesn't allow you to select targets for damage. But in order to get full value, you must have a supply of corpses, which creates additional difficulties for activating the effect to the full. Also, your deck should only contain frost runes. Potentially strong effect, but too many restrictions.
Malignant Horror is not such a weak card. You can easily duplicate this creature once, to get 4 bodies, which will subsequently replenish the balance of corpses. And theoretically, allow you to repeat the duplication several times. In this case, your utility ratio will be significantly higher. The card can find a place in token archetypes, but the complexity of implementing this scenario will also be much higher.
Might of Menethil is a weapon with a freezing option. The benefit of this effect is comparable to the Flurry spell at rank 3. Almost every Hearthstone weapon has an inflated benefit and delayed value, as you can't use the full durability for a turn. One hit is capable of dealing 4 damage, which means it is the equivalent of a classic spell for 3 mana. But by dealing damage to a creature, you lose your own hit points, which creates some advantage for the opponent and thus balances this type of card. Next on the list is Frost Strike. The spell is both a damage dealer and a resource generator. Activating the Discover effect will require some conditions to be met, but getting full value will be relatively easy. According to our algorithm, the nominal value of the Discover effect is 2 mana. Since this mechanic consists of 2 actions, finding a card, which is equivalent to the Dredge mechanic, plus drawing a card. In general, this is a very useful spell.
Next in line is Frostwim Fury. This spell is an upgraded version of Snowfall Guardian. For an extra mana crystal, you will deal 5 damage, which is the actual cost of a fireball, plus the freeze effect will not affect your minions. Summoning a creature and completely immobilizing the opponent's board, in the long run, allows you to deal additional damage. The enemy will have significantly less opportunity to counter this threat. Another advantage is the complete lack of difficulty in obtaining value. Even if the opponent does not allow your creature to deal damage, which will reduce your potential value, you will get a lot of benefits.
Skeletal Sidekick is a copy of the Abusive Sergeant. It's very funny that our algorithm placed this card at the top of the list. This is only because this effect was extremely useful in classic Hearthstone. Skeletal Sidekick allows you to turn your other creature into a stronger version and thus deal more damage. The difficulty lies in the fact that you must have a token ready to attack, which affects the difficulty of obtaining value. But you can use your hero power.
The Sarian does absolutely crazy things. In addition to the main stats, he is able to deal a total of 6 damage in the long run and also leaves another 3 over 1 body upon death, which will allow you to get 2 corpses. The utility ratio is 2.8. In other words, for the actual cost, you will get almost 3 times more benefits compared to the classic basics of Hearthstone. Moreover, the complexity of activating effects is almost absent. Thus, this benefit will be stable in almost every game. Just a must-have card for every deck that has activated at least one Frost Rune. Unlike Thessarian, Lady Deathwhisper has a variable value. The effect of copying cards in hand is nothing new. We've seen similar mechanics before. But your benefit will depend on many factors that can affect the number of cards that this effect will bring to you, which means that in each game your value will be different. In our opinion, Shadow Visions among the spells has the most in common with this mechanic. Deathwhisper can copy and add up to 5 spells to your hand. But let's consider a more realistic scenario in which you manage to copy at least 3 cards. In this case, the utility ratio will be almost 3. This is a very high result.
Rune Forging draws a specific card, and makes it 1 mana cheaper. Thus, according to our algorithm, for 1 mana you will get 3 times more benefits. But the trick is, that you won't be able to get these benefits on the first turn, as you will need a corpse, to activate an additional effect.
Rimefang Sword allows you to get a lot of small benefits. Deal damage and make your spells cheaper. For 3 mana, your maximum long-term value is equivalent to 11 mana. But most of that benefit comes from the additional value of stacking effects. Let's talk about one more weapon. The legendary Frostmourne has the potential to bring a huge amount of value but in a very delayed perspective. Moreover, your benefit will vary depending on the matchups. In order to generate a board of creatures, you will have to sacrifice your own hit points, which will not always be possible. If you manage to kill 3 creatures, your maximum value could be 26 mana or even more. But it will be difficult to achieve this result, since you will gain benefits over the course of 3 turns.
Deathchiller is similar to Flamewaker, but the more balanced description makes this card more of a tool against aggressive decks than a finisher. One activation of the effect applies 2 copies of Moonfire that hits 2 different targets and is the equivalent of a 1 mana. If you manage to cast 4 spells during a turn, you will deal 8 damage and thus get impressive value, but it will be difficult to achieve this result.
Acolyte of Death is a copy of the classic Cult Master. You are potentially able to draw 6 cards per turn, and thus get a ton of value, but for this, you need to meet a number of conditions, which makes this combination very difficult. You can try to use this card with Army of the Dead. In this case, it will be much easier to achieve high efficiency.
And the last card, but not least, is Bonebreaker. At first glance, this is a completely unremarkable card, but it shows the level of power creep in the game very well. Do you remember the Bloodclaw card? Now you can get the same weapon without negative effects and more importantly with a useful bonus. It's just crazy. A completely broken card that doesn't need to observe difficult conditions to get all the value. This is potentially the strongest card of the set.
Let's move on to the conclusions. The main features of Runes of Frost are freezing, mana manipulation, random damage, specific target damage with weapons and spells, plus pronounced spell synergy. Theoretically, you will have enough tools to hold back the opponent's board, and in the late game, you can deal burst damage with the combo potential. But the hypothetical 3 rune decks of Frost don't look broken. In order to receive an increased amount of value, you will have to meet several criteria. Plus, this strategy does not have an independent finisher, which means you will have to fight with the help of synergy and card combinations.
In addition, we received a huge number of useful tools that will definitely be integrated into decks with other runes.
But besides the special rules for building a deck and a new resource, among the Frost rune cards, we did not see strategies that offer a fundamentally new experience. Most of them are copies of old cards with minor modifications and improvements. And it's a little sad, because again we can expect predictable gameplay.
What do you think of the new Frost rune cards? Are they unique enough? Which one is the most powerful?
Share your thoughts in the comments.
And join the voting on our community tab.
That's all for today. We hope to be able to get in touch in the future.
Take care of yourself.
And never give up.
Job's done.